Hello and welcome to the module on social research. Now we have been discussing say in last few classes regarding migration, regarding the rural urban divide, regarding certain sociological concepts and so on. Now if we take these concepts to research that suppose we need to study or design a study so that we can have certain conclusive evidences for how to say get certain informations from the villages or from certain urban areas and design certain things, because from an architectural point of view it will be very much it will be mandatory, or it will be an imperative for us to get certain informations through which we can actually uh, come out with something which is going to be helpful for the people for whom we are designing. So the idea of doing a social research is basically that we need to go to the people, or because we will discuss a few of the research methods, that what kind of research methods are used in sociology, or what kind of research methods are used in social sciences, and with that we will try to understand that how that data which we will be collecting, or the data which we will be using, already it is present in some form of studies, which we can use so that it can actually help or there can be a betterment of the adjoining areas or people. Because, like, look, there can be certain kind of constructions, there can be certain kind of developments, there can be certain kind of I will say drawings, or certain kind of whatever we are building, not from the point of view of the people who are going to use it, rather than from the point of view of people who are, say, constructing it, or people who are producing it, or people who are commercially associated with it. Because usually what we do is that we develop certain commercially viable buildings, and apart from that we take certain concerns of other people into consideration as well. But now the stress is that first we should go to the people and uh, understand what is it which they want, what is it which they require, and from those data, or from those say inputs, we are developing or we are designing the buildings or whatever spaces which we need to create. So the whole idea of doing this research or doing this work is precisely to develop certain kind of say findings, or we should have certain kind of findings which we can use for the betterment of the population. Now if you ask me, we will be dividing this into 3 or 4 lectures, and in all these lectures we will be discussing on certain, because you will get a lot of material on internet, on lot of material on say in the books as well, where you will find how to do a social research, what are the things which are involved in this and that. So rather than discussing about those things, because that is going to be another supplementary material which we will be using, rather than discussing about those things, because those will be available, you can read it on your own, and we will be discussing them in the classes. What is more important for me is to understand that how to conduct a research, because what are the things which are there in the research, how research are conducted and so on, is something which you will find in the book. Now there are certain nitty-gritties, because you need to get the best input, you need to get the best information, you need to get the real information from people, and for that you need to be very patient, you need to be very I will say you need to provide them with that kind of comfortability, so that they can come out with the best and they can come out with the truth, that what is it which they want, what is it which they need to say, what we need to address as designers, right? So those things are certain things which we will be discussing in this series of lectures. Okay, so there are mainly 4 ways in which research is conducted in sociological domains, or in any kind of social studies. So First is that in this part of the lecture, we will try to understand that what is it which we need to understand, how research is conducted, how these researches or these types are different from each other. In the second part of the lecture, we will discuss about few things or those issues, those certain things which are very important for us in order to get the data from them properly. Anyways, so let us start with the first understanding of research. Now, research can be divided into one of the classifications can be that whether we will try to use primary data or whether we will use secondary data. Now, what is the distinction or what is the difference between primary data and secondary data? Primary data is basically the information or the inputs which we have gathered on our own. That means we have designed a study, we have designed a questionnaire, we have designed certain kind of interviews and so on, and from there we are collecting the primary data. So if you see, this part is basically primary data analysis. Okay, so this is basically concerning primary data. That means what we are doing is that we will be collecting data on our own. Now, collecting data, because we need to study, we need to develop certain questionnaire, we need to design a study, we need to say construct something, and because of that we need the inputs of those people who will be using it, or those people who are already staying over there, and we need to develop certain things over there, right? So given that understanding, what are the things which we will be requiring, or how these things are conducted? First thing is survey method. Now, what is survey method? We understand, but still, survey method is basically that we now try to understand. We will have a cross section of the population. What does it mean that we will be having the cross section of the population? Like, suppose there is a population of, say, a village which is around 3,000. Suppose, like, this is the population. Now, one way is to conduct going door to door and getting inputs and informations from everybody, but that is not a very feasible thing. That is not something which usually people or usually research conducts. So they take a cross section. Now, this cross section is basically understood from a mathematical point of view, like this is a cross section of this whole population, right? But there will be certain aspects of sampling and so on, which we will be discussing in the next lecture. But what usually people do is that whenever they are studying, say whenever they are surveying, right? They survey, we know what is a survey. So we will go with some questionnaires and we will ask certain people about certain things. So for that, usually random sampling is used. We will be using, or we will be understanding what is random sampling and all these things in the later lectures. But usually what is done is, and something this is important for us, is that we cannot collect the data from everybody. Maybe you will find that this is a smaller entity. 3,000 people we can always go and study, right? Because 3,000 people may be in, say, 500 houses, yeah, 700 houses, right? So studying from 500 to 700 houses is something which is going to be easy for us. But suppose if this population is like this or like this and so on, then you will understand that it is going to be very, very difficult. So given that understanding, what we do is that we will collect data from few people. Usually researches take place with, say, 100 or 200 or 500 people. Usually these are standard markers that is used for a population of around up to 5,000 people. They will have studies like this, and it provides a very I will say good estimate of the kind of things which we require, or the kind of things which we will be requiring, the reality, the inputs which are given, or the inputs which are provided by them, are certain things which we can use. So that is the idea, that a cross section of the population is used for survey. Now, it is also like this survey can be organized both, say, through door to door. Say if I write door to door, so this is one way of organizing. But nowadays it is very popular to organize an online survey, right? We all use Google Forms and we use all these survey monkeys, and so many websites are there through which you can use or collect data from people, right? So there are certain pros and cons of both the things, and that is something which I am going to discuss in the next lecture, that how this survey needs to be conducted. But for the time being, let us try to understand that one of the classifications can be the offline mode, that is you directly go to the people and collect information from them, or the second mode is that you collect the data through an online platform, right? So that is one way. Field work will be completely different. Now, field work is not only collecting data or survey. There is something more to it. What is more? Like, first thing is that there will not be an online mode, right? So this is something which you should understand, that the first and foremost difference between these two things is that field work is not going to be, or is not something where you will find that people can have an online understanding. You really need to go and collect the data. I was discussing that what is the difference between survey and field work. Now, surveys will be more like questionnaires and filling and those things. This is more like that you go directly to the people and you go for participant observation or observation and so on, because like field work cannot be conducted in an online mode. Second, it is going to be something which will provide you more accurate or closer to the truth understanding. That means that suppose suppose there is a population, okay. Now, one way of connecting to this population was that you printed some questionnaires, you went to them, you get it filled, and you come back. Fine. So this is like something which can be conducted on your behalf by somebody else as well. But now suppose you are a hardcore researcher and you want to know something directly from them. So you need to have a participant observant kind of thing. Now, what does it mean? Participant observation, yeah, participant observant kind of thing. That means that you have to directly go to those people, ask questions. It may not be a question like in survey you can have a question like A, B, C, D, or yes, no, or true, false, these kind of things, right? And these are easy to study after you collect the data, but then they will not provide you accurate information. Why? Because you yourself are having certain things in your mind, and because of that you have provided certain kind of options to them, because it is easy to chart, easy to use, say like an SPSS softwares which people are using. So if you are using SPSS or you are using some other kind of software to collect the data, and after that you are using you are collecting the data, and after that you are analyzing it. So these methods are very helpful, but then it is not going to give you the real picture. The real picture is something which is provided in fieldwork, where you go to the participant, you collect the data, and the questions are open-ended. Here, usually the questions are closed-ended, right? Closed-ended means that they are with some kind of option, certain kind of things which are already there, and the participant has to just react to whatever your question is, right? He or she cannot provide you more than what is more than something which is there in the question, right? But here in the field work, you can directly go to the people, you can collect the data. You may not need a very structured questionnaire. You can go for an unstructured questionnaire, because the more you will ask questions to people or discuss with them, more inputs you will get, and from that you will collect more information. This is going to provide you accurate data. This is also going to provide you closer to the truth data, but it is difficult to analyze. It is difficult to analyze because this is more like qualitative analysis, right? So qualitative is always difficult from, say, quantitative. So quantitative is always easier, because what you have certain informations, you can analyze it through any kind of software, or you can analyze it without a software as well. But here you need to actually analyze the data, whatever they have spoke to you, or whatever they have informed you, and so on. So those kind of things, we will come to these things as well. Now let us come to experiment. This is also primary data collection. Experiments can also be like, say, an interview, right? So now There is something which I will like to tell you, and this is something because there can be case studies in field work as well, in also experiments as well, and so on. We will be discussing all those things. But let me tell you one thing as a researcher, which is going to be very important for you. Uh, like suppose you go to a person to collect a data. Now you know why sociology is named as sociology. Auguste Comte was the person who is considered as the father of sociology, right? And he wanted to name it as social physics, but later on he named it as sociology because it is not going to be very scientific, or that is what his understanding was, rather than it is going to be a social scientific thing or something which is not exactly following the tenets of science. Human beings do not behave the way they have informed you. Similarly, human beings do not inform you the way you get, or the way you want to know the information. Excuse me. Why I'm saying this? There is something called Hawthorn effect. The participant may not behave as per your requirement, or may not tell you exactly the truth, or may not tell you the correct information, or maybe having certain kind of apprehensions and therefore may not disclose certain kind of information, or maybe is having some kind of performance pressure, and because of that he or she may try to fill certain things in a very different way. There are two ways of doing research. One is that when you are collecting data, you may or may not. Now, there will be certain questions of research ethics as well, which we will be discussing at a later stage. But just to develop those things, because you need to keep all these things in mind, you may require to tell that you are collecting data for this purpose, or you may not. If you feel like that if you disclose the purpose, then the information which you will gather from them is not going to be helpful, or is not going to be something, because people, because of fear, people because of some kind of shyness, some kind of shame, some kind of taboo, do not disclose certain kind of information, and especially in sociological researches, or they have fear of persecution, or they have some kind of pressure on them, or they will not like to tell you about certain issues because they think that it is very personal, very private by nature, and so on. So given that understanding, we need to have studies which should not come out with the Hawthorn effect. Hawthorn effect precisely says that whenever the participant, whenever the person who is from where we are collecting the data, if he or she knows about the purpose of the research, or knows even that he or she is under an experimental condition, because like if you ask somebody to fill say if you just talk to somebody, he or she may disclose a lot of information to you, that this is what is happening in my village, there is communal tension, or there is no tube well, and blah blah blah, so many informations he or she can give you. But if you go to them and ask, so he may not tell you about the communal tension which is there in the village. He may not even tell you that there is no say tube well in the village, because he knows that if he will disclose this, then the municipal corporation will be very angry, or the panchayat will be very angry with him or her. So given those understandings as well, because of fear, there can be some shyness because of certain things, like whenever people are talking about reproductive health, so a lot of issues come whenever they need to collect the data, because if you talk to people, they say a lot of things, they will inform you about a lot of things. But if you are going directly to them with a questionnaire and say that okay, what is this, what is that, they may not inform you, right? So those things also need to be taken care of. So experiment is something, and this is something which is going to be very important for you, that whether you are planning to tell them about the say the purpose of the study, or why you are conducting the study, or whether you are even conducting a study, or it was just a friendly discussion and so on, is an important thing. Research ethics does tell you that you need to take informed consent from people, right? And you need to inform them about that this is why we are collecting the data, and if they give you the consent, then only you can go with the research. But there are a lot of researches, there are a lot of studies which are conducted without actually telling the purpose of the study to people, and because of that their anonymity is also maintained, because the people who have participated in those research, we do not disclose their names, right? Or we do not disclose the information exactly, rather than we provide with certain kind of charts and so on. So we will be talking about those nitty-gritties as well. Last, this is what we call as secondary data analysis. Now this is different from primary data analysis, and this is something which also needs to be understood. There is a lot of data which is available with government agencies, with NGOs, with certain kind of private concerns and so on, and we may not directly need to go to people and collect the data, because there are a lot of data which is available across, and that is the data which is lying vacant or is lying unused. Many a times the data is collected for some purpose, but that study could not be conducted, and the data is staying with certain kind of agencies. So we can collect and we can take the data. Maybe we can use that data directly for our study, or we can use that data as a base study, like a study was conducted in 2010 and we need to reconduct the study in 2020. So the 2000 data, we cannot collect the 2000 data now, right? But the 2000 data is already available with say some agency or some company or some government office. So we can say request them to provide us with that data, and if they provide us with that data, so we can use that data, or sometimes it is freely available as well, so we can use that data as a base study, or sometimes we can use that data even for our own study. So that is the secondary data analysis. So the classification, I will say the rough classification is that we can conduct surveys, fieldworks and experiments in the primary data analysis, and we can collect secondary data from some sources and use it. But there are certain aspects of these research, because social science research is different from scientific research. Scientific research, you are not involved, the human beings are not involved, right? You are not involving human beings for your research. So once human beings are, in fact, even in scientific data analysis, there are a lot of research ethics issues. And it's not only about research ethics, it is also about properly getting the data, because an instrument or a phenomenon is not going to change its nature if we are studying it, right? But the human being can change its nature if we are studying it. That is what the Hawthorn effect also says. So given that thing, we need to be very cautious with also this understanding that the data which we are collecting, is it the right data, or is it something which is going to help us with finding the truth or designing the proper thing for them. Because if in a village there is some communal tension and you need to develop a community center, so once you will go and study, you will understand that there is not the requirement of one community center, but maybe 2 or 3, depending upon the ethnography of that village, or the people, or the kind of people who are there in the village. So those things also are certain things which you need to understand, or which you need to take into consideration before developing or designing a study, as well as developing and designing a structure for them. So this was the basic thing which I wanted to bring in front of you. In the next lecture, we will be discussing around certain other nitty-gritties and complexities which are associated with research. So we will try to understand that how that research needs to be conducted, so that we can reach closer to the truth. Thank you.